So we just opened up the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining. So I'm Amparo Cid. I'm one of the co-founders at Cida Macedo, and joining me today is Aida Macedo as well. Aida, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Aida Macedo, and I am a member of this wonderful company that Amparo and I started. I'm also an attorney, and both Amparo and I went to UC Davis Law. That's how we met.
I know, and we studied for the bar exam together. We both ended up landing in the Central Valley. So I'm Amparo Cid. I have roots in the Bay Area of California. Went to Davis for law school, and then came out here to the Central Valley to work on rural issues at a nonprofit. And so I really had the privilege of being a community organizer, but also a community lawyer at the same time. So I think as we have this plática, so we're going to be talking about why Justice Ginsburg meant so much to us as attorneys. But we also want to have this conversation where folks have action items and things that you can do, because I think as Aida and I have been reflecting on things, we really saw where the courts have been heading since 2016, with all of the appointments happening at the federal level, which I think has made us really feel the urgency of why 2018 was so important, but then why this fight is really going to be the fight for our generation and future generations, because the courts have fundamentally changed since 2016. But before we go into all of that, we wanted to just honor just an incredible justice. And so I think on my end, Aida, the last statistics that I looked at were that there's only 5% Latina or Latinos that are attorneys in the entire United States. 5%. 5%, like that's it.
I think it's lower in California because of our passage rate.
Yeah, it's lower. And Latina lawyers, I think we're at like 1%. So there's two of us here right now who have passed one of the most difficult bars in all of the U.S., unless the New Yorkers are looking at us right now, but we'll say California is harder. So it's a really big deal. So I'm going to pivot to you right now and say if you want to see anything about Justice Ginsburg and like why she means so much to, you know, you're from LA originally. I'm from a small town in Morgan Hill. Like, why does Justice Ginsburg mean so much to us as attorneys, as Latina lawyers?
Yeah, I think, you know, now that we've been out of law school, I think 9 years or so, I think we forget about the real struggle to be in the legal profession as a woman. In addition, you know, as a woman of color. And I think in law school, you know, we read a lot of decisions, and we kind of knew judges here and there through different school programs, maybe. You know, for me, I had the privilege of externing and working for 2 judges and being an assistant to a retired, to former Supreme Court Justice Reynoso. And I saw very little women on the bench in general. And so I think just hearing about, you know, Ruth Ginsburg, Justice Ginsburg, and how she became kind of a pop icon, I think, you know, it's more meaningful than that to me. She was only the second woman on the Supreme Court of the United States. You know, she was not really this like, you know, huge progressive icon at the beginning. It was just her presence alone was monumental, and I think progressive just to have a woman there. And then later on, she became this kind of icon for progressive values. You know, her dissent on, for me, what's really meaningful, her dissent on the Voting Rights Act litigation is huge, talking about how voter suppression continues to occur, has been happening throughout the history of the United States. I think if you didn't have somebody like her, you wouldn't have Sotomayor now on the bench and what she means to the bench, right? And what she means to us as well. And so I think there's just so much happening. I think for me, like feeling how our community is constantly under attack, our families are struggling, and to have this loss on top of all that and what it means really to our future and to our everyday lives. I don't think people understand what impact the Supreme Court has on a practical level.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the first time that I see progressives really understanding why the judiciary matters so much. And I think like you can tell people that this is really important. And it's crazy. It's crazy how much our generation has taken for granted, right? When I was thinking about Justice Ginsburg, I'm like, wow, it was barely until the 1960s that we had Thurgood Marshall on the bench, right? And how transformative like Brown versus Board of Education was. Mm-hmm. That only like less than 100 years ago, like less than 100, like in our parents' lifetime, it was legal. Like the law said it was legal to discriminate, right? And how then you have like the law of our generation come down through Justice Ginsburg, who wasn't until the 80s that she got on the bench, right? Until the 80s that she got onto the bench. And how before that it was legal to discriminate based on someone's gender. And it wasn't, so it's, I think, and what, 2000, was it 2009? 2009 probably, that Sotomayor was appointed to the bench. So
yeah, I was in law school.
Yeah, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is literally happening in our lifetime, and it's a reminder why we can't take these things for granted. So this is why when we talk about social justice and issues, we can't forget who was making the laws, right? So I think so many times people focus on elected officials, and that's super important, but there are people writing our laws and interpreting them, and that interpretation matters. So when you have someone on the bench like Ginsburg, who went to Harvard Law mm-hmm. during a time when it was like, oh, you're lucky to be there. So I kind of want to bounce this back to kind of our experience in law school, right? Because I think that I was a class ahead and you were in the class below me. And so I think even in California, at a law school where we were named after King Hall, Martin Luther King, right? Mm-hmm. How much further we still have to go. So
there were 9 Latinos in my class in Davis, and that was 2008. There were 2 Black students out of a class of I think 250, and within that group of Latinos, I think there was only a handful of us who came from low-income backgrounds. I mean, that just tells you how in a progressive state as California, in a progressive law school like Martin Luther King Jr. Law School, how not representative it is of the population and how isolating it is. You have so many students who their parents are lawyers. They come from money. They have a different experience. And I remember one of my most memorable experiences in law school was I took this policing seminar, right, with a really great professor there. And we were having this discussion about, is it probable cause? Is it suspicious for police to stop a group of men of color? And all these students in class were giving their very legal analysis about, this could be suspicious because of X, Y, and Z and blah, blah, blah. And I raised my hand. I'm like, that's racist. like in the hood, you congregate outside in the corner. There's nowhere else to go. You don't have parks. You don't, so it's like I had this, and people were like looking at me like scared. And I was nervous to speak up because it was a very privileged environment. It was not an environment where they were used to that commentary. And I think, you have to navigate these like places of privilege and these places of otherness. Like you're different, and that doesn't mean that my experience was the same as other kids who grew up in Southeast LA and Southgate, right? But I saw the law, and I saw and the interpretation of like reasonableness standard very different than what my classmates saw.
Yeah, that's so important. And because it's so true. Like my class, like I don't know what the numbers were. I mean, I'm very honest with everyone that asked me. I saw law school as a means to an end. People say that I was really friendly and really supportive, but I just was like, look, I'm here, I'm at study, and then I'm going home, right? And so law school was actually the first time that I was able to afford to buy the books. And that's because Jack Kent Cooke Foundation paid for that. Like, so I still have, like, if I flip my camera right now, I still have my books, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, like these, like let's bounce to some constitutional law or whatever. But yeah, I remember how the perspective was built, even though we had to work so hard because people were balancing like finances, family issues as well, but then the academic part, and it's super lonely. Like it's just, I think it's hard to explain to people how the process, like you're literally molded in year one to kind of like try to let go of those very real experiences. And I think that part of what we did is we pushed back against that, right? And we thought our experiences was like, actually, I know you're saying you're a strict like constitutionalist or that you're interpreting this, but really, like, what does that actually mean? Like, if you look at who people are, at the time the Constitution was written, like the last time I heard, the Irish, Italians, and different people weren't part of that table and were actually left out. Mm-hmm. And if we're looking at religious like rights and all of that, so many people have been left out. And so Ginsburg making it, going from being a woman who goes to law school, graduates at the top of her class, the difficulties in landing a job because of the sexism, plus you add the layer of being a Jewish woman, mm-hmm. It's just like, it's insane that it's not that long ago when that pathway was so difficult. And when you talk about our own journey, right, in the legal field, how so little has actually changed. Mm-hmm. The law moves incredibly slowly. There's different components of the law, right? Like when we look at, I think a big red flag that folks are barely starting to pay attention to is immigration law, right? For a lot of attorneys, it's like, oh, that's not the sexy part of the law. People that are like low income attorneys like normally do that, blah, blah, blah. It's really like there's a lot of racism and sexism because when you actually look at who's practicing, it's a lot of women and women of color attorneys. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the legal nuances of what is allowed to happen and how that system works, you begin to appreciate how much further we need to go because, again, just because something is legal doesn't make it right. Right. And it was just a little bit ago, when we blink, that gender discrimination and so many other forms of discrimination were legal under the law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that the judiciary and the legal kind of the advocacy for the judiciary and like the importance of the legal profession, we're probably like left to the end. I think now it's gotten more traction because Trump has been sued so much by, different attorney generals, by civil rights groups. I mean, they're and people are just, burned out, and I think people are realizing more, like, why are the courts important, and why are they a check, in this power grab. And now, I mean, to me, it's, I get so nervous when I think about us losing an independent judiciary, and thinking about all the lifetime appointments that Trump has made. He's confirmed the most federal judges on the bench, I think, of any recent president. The Senate has just basically rubber stamped a bunch of judges who have little or no experience. And so to me, that is frightening, because, like, this is our lifetime. Like, for the rest of my life, these judges are going to be on the bench. As an attorney, like, just knowing what you're up against already as a woman of color in litigation and doing work in the courts is frightening. But what's even more frightening is, like, you know, we just got like a DACA decision recently, right? Like, that's affecting our families on the ground, our everyday lives. There's wage and hour cases before the Supreme Court all the time. That affects all the workers, our families. I think people don't understand, like, that's like our last resort, our last check of like power grabs and injustice and imbalance, in my view. And I feel like if we just continue to lose these seats and these appointments and these really important judicial positions, like, I think, it's really dangerous.
Yeah. And I think one of the things for me that Justice Ginsburg kind of reminds me, and I think other folks have gone, is that even if you're going to lose, you have to speak up, right? Like that. I mean, because you're right, she wasn't that voice of like progressive thought at the beginning, right? I mean, the gender issues for sure, but I think even when we look at the DACA decision that came down, right? The pinning it on the Administrative Procedures Act, the scariness of not having an executive branch that is actually implementing what the Supreme Court said, right? What they laid down the law for. But I think also looking at the written opinions, right? Sotomayor was the only one who was like, hey, and obviously she said this very eloquently and not the way I'm saying it right now.
Yeah,
but,
translate it for us.
but Sotomayor said, like, hey, like, this isn't just about a procedure question. This is also about race. Like, Trump said that Mexicans are rapists and that we're criminals and all of this. And out of that bench of 9, right, even when you have like Kagan, you had Ginsburg on the bench, you had like other folks, right, who lined up on the row of DACA, but they still couldn't say it was about race.
Yeah.
Right. And so why those seats matter. But so even when you are on the losing end of things, we still have to speak up. Like, we still have to do that whole, like, I dissent, and we have to make our voice heard, because if we don't, then like, what is the point of a democracy? Right? Like, I think all these questions pop up. So, what was one of your like favorite things about kind of Ginsburg as you reflect, like the myth, the legend, the cases? I think for me, it was recent. It was more the recent dissent, and like kind of her seeing her throw down around the Affordable Care Act, and we didn't win it on the Hobby Lobby side of things, but on the ACA side of things, just keeping it and saying it was constitutional. That part was one. So I appreciated that recent opinion from her. What about you?
I think for me, given like the election protection work that we started doing in 2012, I think throughout all these elections, I've really learned how procedures that are in place really, really suppress voters from our communities and people of color and first time voters and people with convictions. And um, I think for me, her opinion and her dissent on the gutting of the voting rights Section 5 law, the Supreme Court, I loved her quote. I think it was quoted everywhere. It was something like, saying there's no discrimination in voting rights now is like not using your umbrella. I don't know. I'm totally butchering it. Not using your umbrella in the rain or something like that, because they basically were saying, you don't need this law anymore. Discrimination is over, is what the majority was saying. And she's basically like, look, just because it's been working, it doesn't mean it's not we don't need Section 5. And I see it every time we do election protection. I see how many people are disenfranchised through these procedures in place to protect the vote, and these claims of voter fraud and people are voting twice, which is total BS. And I'm like, we know who they don't want to vote, and we know why it's so incredibly hard to even just read your voter sample booklet that you get. The language that they use is not even like at a normal reading level. So to me, for her to just flush out those issues, even though she didn't have the majority, is so important, because it's basically, it's like legislators should look at those dissents and say, these are the problems that we need to fix through legislation, and enforcing and bringing back the Voting Rights Act the way it should be.
Yeah. I mean, you're right, Aida, because those recent changes around campaign finance reform, around the VRA, it really shows how, even if you're in a state like California, those decisions and those rollbacks are going to end up impacting us, right? I remember having this conversation, I think it was in 2016. I was at this fancy philanthropic event, and, only Latina. And I was trying to pitch to people like, hey, we need to be talking about election protection, and we need to be talking about that in California. And people were looking at me like I was crazy. Like, literally someone told me, like, Amparo, we're in California. Like, that doesn't impact us. We're good. And I was just like, have you been to the Central Valley? Because we've been running a project since 2012. And the stuff that we've seen and documented and that has made changes here, it's stuff that's happening like in the South, right? And sometimes it's really hard as women of color to look this up, because we'll have like other people go like, no, everything's fine, like just let it be.
Yeah.
But I told that person in 2016, I'm like, here's the thing, like I get that you're saying that California is fine, but it's not. Because even if we make the assumption, which is a huge assumption, that there aren't any election protection issues here in California, what is happening in the other states and those rollbacks end up impacting who is elected at the highest level. And who is elected at the highest level, if you have a Congress that doesn't have a backbone and isn't implementing their constitutional duty, right? It matters. And then if you have a judiciary, which I think people started to see this with Bush v. Gore, that is very political, that matters. And so I think the legacy of Justice Ginsburg, I mean, the amount of work that she had to do to get to the same place that a man just gets handed. I mean, look at Kavanaugh. He does not deserve to be on that bench at all. Like, when you look at his actual, like, role as to what he has accomplished as a legal scholar, I mean, you can't compare him to Ginsburg. The names that they're floating right now, you just can't, like, it's insulting to compare, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel that a lot of the time we forget that there are so few people of color that make it to law school because of a school to prison pipeline, because of all these other issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that ends up impacting who is even able to make it to get an appointment at a federal level, at a state level, and then at a level like the Supreme Court. I mean, these appointments for the federal bench, there's some folks on there who haven't even tried a trial. And they're young.
Yeah,
they're young.
Very young. They're our age.
They're
Very
our
young.
age. They're very young. Very young.
Extremely
Exactly.
young.
Exactly. But yeah, these are lifetime appointments. So, all right. You know, this isn't just going to be a sad conversation. I think we need to celebrate some of the things that she did and that she brought to us.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to bring up, I went to see the movie they put out. I know there's been several movies about her and her life, but me and some friends, we went to see the one that was in the movie theaters last year. Didn't we go together? Yeah, we went together. Anyway.
I have no frame of reference before March.
Yeah, before this terrible year happened, we used to have a life and go to movies and stuff. We went to go watch her movie, and I really loved like how I never got to meet her obviously, but just how humble she seemed to be, like through like videos and like her workout routine, and how like, you know, like here she is like this, you know, she's on the freaking Supreme Court, and you know, she was showing all her necklaces that people had sent her, and she had them all like super organized, and you know, and just how resilient she was in terms of being sick and dealing with raising kids, you know, being married to another lawyer, you know, who apparently was like, you know, really prominent tax lawyer. And I think like it is a story of resilience, you know, and everything that we're dealing with right now. I feel like a lot of friends and family, they just feel so hopeless, and they just feel like, you know, every month is something new. We're dealing with a pandemic, we're dealing with fires, we're dealing with environmental issues, we're dealing with uncertainty over immigration, all this stuff, right? And we keep getting hit with stuff, and everybody feels this like sense of like, okay, we're doomed. But I think that what I really took from her life is like her resilience, regardless of what's happening and what she got hit with, you know, she always just took life as it came and just like came back to her passion, which was the law.
Yeah, you're so right. Like that movie, right? She had her like sweatshirt. I think that was like super diva, and she's like lifting these weights. And this is someone who is going through pancreatic cancer, right? Like pancreatic cancer is not a joke. And so that also, you know, I know we're trying to be hopeful right now, but that makes me really sad, because I think about there's a problem with our democracy when having someone pass away, right? Like she had to hold on.
Yeah.
Like the importance of her having to hold on for so long, and the pain that she must have been in, but just like still being such like this legal mind that she still got through. She still got through that last term. But yeah, I think about, you're right, there's a couple of movies that have come out. There's that one that was, you know, showed her in her element. I just thought right now of the one where like Felicity, I can't remember her last name, but she's an actress.
Yeah.
She played her. It was like on the basis of sex, and it was the movie. At the end, they have her walking up like the steps of the Supreme Court, and like so it brought me back to I met her when I was in undergrad.
What?
And I had met. So I had
didn't
met
know
all
that.
of these. Yeah, I had met all of these. Like, well, hold up. So I had met all of these like, artists and blah blah, and I was like, oh, I don't care about you, like whatever. Like I wasn't jaded, but I'm the nerd that since I was a kid, like I was like, oh yeah, the Supreme Court, and I just really believe, and I still do, right? I think that we become lawyers because we believe in the law and we believe that there's all these problems, but like we have to keep going to make things better. So I got invited to present for this project in Canada, and she was like I was like, let's think about like just like a person. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is good.
Oh wow.
Like it was like the biggest thing. It was.
It is a
it
big
still
deal.
is. Look at me. But she was tiny. She was so tiny. So if you look at that movie at the very end of it, she's like going up the steps, and you just see like tiny but super resilient.
Yeah.
That grit to just keep going, and then everything that she did. So
I also like that she didn't step down when they asked her to step down.
Yeah, she's like on my own time. Like,
I know people were like, she should have stepped down when, President Obama was in office, blah, blah. And I'm like, why did she have to step down? Do they ask the men to step down? I don't know.
No, the answer is no. They did not ask the men to step down. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, putting these different responsibilities on women that often don't go on men. So anything, I mean, should we pivot now to kind of what's happening now and what this all means as we go forward?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is what we want to tell everyone who's here today. Listen in to these, this is literally how the conversations that you and I have normally go. So you guys can listen in. I think for a lot of people, and, I'll be real, like on Friday, I definitely had my moments of bursting into tears and just like sadness on many levels, right? Like sadness that her family doesn't get the opportunity the way that they should grieve, that they should be able to grieve, right? Because we've been in a moment where our judiciary is so politicized that we forget the humanity of people, right? But then I also felt sadness for her and having to go through, like, the fact that her dying wish had to be around like an appointment versus something else, right? Mm-hmm. But then I also feel like we have been talking about this since 2016 when the bench has been getting crowded. Yeah. And all of these appointments have been ramming through the congressional branch, and these lifetime appointments are being made. So I think one thing that I would tell people is this: you need to feel your emotions and you need to feel your sadness. I think it doesn't help anyone to be jaded about the system more than we already are. Right? And I feel like this is where we all have to channel that same energy that like people before have done, right? Because if we look at the bigger context of where things are, the things that people like our grandparents went through, that our great-grandparents went through, were so much more extreme than what's happening. Well, it feels really terrible right now too. But I think it's like they didn't stop, right? They didn't stop advocating, and they didn't stop fighting, and they didn't stop like also finding moments for joy. Because we have to be in this not for a short term. This isn't something where if we win in November, like we rest. This is something where we're in the fight of our lifetime. And it doesn't really matter where we continue going. We're gonna we have to change things from our local communities of what's happening to like what judges get appointed, who are our DAs, what do those systems look like, all the way up to the Supreme Court and executive level. So I think people need to take their time to be sad, to be angry, to feel all of that. Like, don't push that out of your life. But I think you can't let that immobilize you. Like, you can't let that stop you from continuing to do all the work that you're doing on a day by day. Like, what do you think, Aida?
Yeah, I think for me too, on Friday, I was just like in shock. And I mean, I don't want to say I was like super surprised, right? But I'm just like, this all can't be happening at the same time. It's like you're just entering a twilight zone. And then, I got a grip. And that night, I signed up to do like phone banking for Joe Biden and Harris, which, by the way, are not my candidates. And
they are now.
They are now.
They are
We're
now.
what do I have? I'm like, I have to, because now it's like so much worse. But anyway, I was gonna vote for them, but I'm not super like, I'm not as moderate as their supporters. And so I signed up for phone banking for every Friday evening. So Friday evenings are usually my pizza night, with Yashar. And I was like, I got to do some phone banking. And I called my father-in-law in Florida, and he doesn't want to vote, but I'm pushing him. I'm going to register him to vote. And I'm taking like extra steps. We're doing election protection, which is already a huge like commitment. And I think, the pitch that I want to make during this webinar is, if you're in Fresno, or, if you're in the Central Valley, or even in your own community in other areas of the state or throughout the United States, look for something that is going to be meaningful to you, and that you're going to feel like you're helping, like standing up for our democracy. Because I agree. I think this is a battle over our democracy, over I was able to travel to different countries and kind of learn from them what has happened and what has really diminished democracies throughout the world. It's not just the United States, it's happening all across Europe too. But the judiciary is one of the last steps before it becomes, before, we really get rid of democracy. So I think whatever you feel is going to help, whatever you think, because all of us have our gifts, all of us have different projects we're involved with, things that we're passionate about. And then for me, it was like, I had to go to the extra step. It's like, I have to phone bank. I have to talk to people in Arizona, even if, I have to fight for something, and I have to keep myself motivated so I don't get to that point where I'm just like, game over, because that doesn't help any of us.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I think there's been so many times where I've just wanted to be like, all right, throw in the towel. Like, and it's like, well, we can't. Like, we literally can't. And, I've been reflecting on this, and I've been reflecting about how people that are in the MAGA camp and Republicans, like, they'll bust out the American flag, they'll do like it on the t-shirt and so many things. And for me, it's like, no, actually what we are all doing, what we do on an everyday is the most patriotic thing that you can do. Because even though we see, the country for what it is, like, there is still something in us that is like not ready to give up, that we're like, no, we believe that we really can form a more perfect union. And we believe that the lives of the next generation, right, the kids that are coming up, our lives, like our families' lives, like, that's what's at stake. Like, that's what's on the table. And in order, like the sacrifices that our parents made in either fleeing from countries where that third branch had toppled, right? Like what that means and what that looks like, where it might seem like things are okay, but they're really, really not okay. And so I feel super patriotic right now.
Exactly.
For all those magic people, it's like, no, like this is where the real patriotism is. But I also think, and I put in the chat box, 3 things where if you are totally lost. So I think what I said is absolutely right. Whatever you can do in your community, like look, is what you're doing is you're doing things for fire relief around, doing food drop-offs for people that are elderly in your community and can't go to grocery stores. Like if you're doing a good deed like that, like you keep doing that, right? Like you keep doing what you can do and what gives you happiness and what brings you some joy and that makes you feel like you're active, right? But if you want to take an extra step, if you're like, you know what, I'm going to throw down because like we all need to. And here's the thing, everyone, like the election is here. Like October, people are going to be able to like get their ballots and send them in.
People are voting right now.
Exactly. So even in another state, people are already. So before we get to the 3 things in the chat box, the first thing I need everyone here to do, I need you to commit to talking to 10 people in your circle. 10 people. I know even the most introverted person who might be like me has 10 people that you can call and you can be like, hey, are you registered to vote? And you can tell them like, that's right, I'm with you. I might not like everyone on the ballot, but you know what? If you don't speak up, then we're giving up entirely, right? Like we're giving up our power. And there's no point in doing that. There's no point in doing that. So I think for those people that have those 10 folks, maybe those 10 folks can't vote. Maybe they're DACA recipients, maybe they're undocumented. Well, you know what? You don't tell them like register to vote because no. But what you tell them is they can participate in other ways that are meaningful. They can totally talk to a neighbor. They can talk to a family member. They can, plug in and maybe they're an artist and they're going to design like a badass flyer that's going to, change hearts and minds. Maybe there's someone who has a gift around like speaking and getting people motivated. So even if someone can't vote, that's okay. They can still participate in different ways. So that's step 1. Step 2, I need you guys to make sure that you're registered to vote. Right? So with COVID and with everything that's happened, some of our families, some of us have had to like go to different areas, whatnot. Just make sure you're registered to vote. Like make sure you're registered. And when you get your ballot, like take that time, fill it out, send it in. I'm a procrastinator, but this is not the time to procrastinate. This is the time where we're gonna get this stuff in, so then we can focus on other things.
And actually, I checked my mom's ballot yesterday, and she was registered at an old address, and she wanted to vote like in Fresno County, but I hadn't had the time to help her. I was just like, here's a link, go do it, whatever, like leave me alone, I'm busy. And then yesterday, or after this happened with RBG, I actually went on the website yesterday and I checked. And it was a good thing I checked because she was not registered for the county she wants to be registered for. So I think, taking the time to help our families who, only speak Spanish or, our elderly folks that don't have, or even just our families who are not going to go on the website to check, it doesn't help to give them the link. You have to go the extra step. I think that is really meaningful too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I now want to share with folks the 3 resources that we're kind of looking at right now, where people can plug in quickly and easily. So we put this in the chat box. One is Save These States. This is a campaign that is focused on the states where we can flip the Senate. These
Why is it important
matter.
to flip the Senate, Amparo?
because if we don't win on the executive branch, we need like a plan B and C and D. That's why. So the Senate is important, people. And you know what? You sign up, you get like these really super motivated emails from people. They're not going to like be emailing you all the time. I think it's like once a week. And you can do calls and they walk you through it. So you could sign up and you can sign up for one state, two states. I would say sign up for one, start with one first. Make sure that it's something you can do versus signing up for like all of them. So sign up for one. There's Arizona, there's Florida, there's Michigan, there's North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And so they have like more things listed here, but that's right now where you can volunteer. And they have basically like these are the states that matter the most as we're thinking about what's at play in the election, who we need to flip. And hey, if you've ever thought about moving somewhere else, what a great time to start talking to people in that state, right?
Yeah,
like feeling
exactly.
it out, seeing if you gel with those folks. The next source that we want to share with people, and the links are in the chat box. It's Save Scottish. So if you haven't plugged in with Indivisibles, they have a campaign right now around calling your senator. So a friend contacted me, I think it was last Friday, and was like, Amparo, what do we do? And I said, well, you know, I think for our senators, like if you're in California, like call them once, just make sure they're on board. I mean, we have two done, we should be fine. So Senator Feinstein recently came out with some really disturbing comments. So you know what? I am going to ask people to sign up for this, to call Senator Feinstein's office.
Wait, I
Because,
didn't know about her comments.
yeah, so I mean, there's been different problematic comments I think,
Okay.
that
I thought
she's
it
been
was
making,
specific.
but recently she did say comments around the filibuster and around Scottish. So we need to call her. We need to call her and we need to keep folks accountable. And it doesn't matter if they're Democrats or Republicans. So in California, I want folks, if you are ready to take that next step, like go ahead and do this. Now, what I'm going to tell you is please, 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 please do not call senators that aren't your senators. So don't call the senators in Arizona. Don't call the senators in Florida and say, like, I'm from California and I believe X, Y, Z. They don't care. Like, that's why the first part is call constituents in those states who can then call their elected representatives, because that does matter. So the first tool that we gave you was the Save Our States. You're going to plug in with constituents in those states, and then they will call their elected officials. For Save Scottish, as Californians, we need to call Senator Feinstein, and we need to just do that check-in with Senator Harris, and Harris is on board. But just make sure to make that call and call to Senator Feinstein. And the last thing that we want to tell folks about today is if you are interested, we are running our election protection project again. So you can go to our website, you can volunteer, and make sure that throughout the state of California, and our focus is going to be on Fresno, Tulare County, and other areas of the Central Valley, that folks are able to vote the day of. And if there are issues that are happening in the lineup, or as people get their ballots, that we're able to start addressing them and escalating them and making sure that everyone is able to exercise their fundamental right to vote. So those three resources are in the chat box. Aida, anything else?
Yeah, and I think also, I think we're very privileged in terms of, now being out of law school, knowing so many lawyers and people, with money. I think people should be donating to, some of those Senate races that are going to help flip the Senate. Even donating like to local organizations that are doing this type of work, I think is also helpful. I think if you feel just overwhelmed and you don't have you're dealing with a lot and you can't sign up to volunteer for anything, I still think donating money is really really important. I think this is kind of why we're in the problem we're in, right? Because of a Supreme Court decision that treats corporations as human beings, and so they donate as much money as they want to candidates who are going to create policies that give them more power. So unfortunately, that's a system that we have. And so I think donating money is still really important and critical in those races. And so I'll send a link to I'll put it on the chat box for a link my friend sent to for who you should be donating to.
That's great. That's great. And so this is the thing, everyone. Feel that sadness, but we can't stay there. Like, we can't stay in that space. Some days, people are going to feel differently. And on those days, you need to take care of yourself. And maybe that's not a good day to make calls and all of those things. Like, it's okay. Like, take that time for yourself as well. But here's what I want everyone to know. We can win. We will win. Like, we need to keep at it. And like, chip by chip, we are going to take this back. We're going to continue to show that our democracy matters and that people's voices matter. And so that means that whatever you can do, whatever action you can take, like, do it. Don't pay attention to what McConnell's doing and Romney's doing and what Collins is doing and all of these little monitos, okay? Like, it doesn't matter. They're going to tell you what you want to hear at that moment in time, or they want to do that media clip light. That does not matter. We work as if we're not going to win. We work as if we have to convince every single person that we possibly can to win. And here's what's going to happen. If we work that way and we don't look at what all of these naysayers are doing, we will win. So this is about us getting excited about this, honoring the legacy of Justice Ginsburg and how much of a badass she was. The folks that came before her, Thurgood Marshall, the legacy that they've left for us as attorneys and as community residents, and the privileges that we have. Because someone spoke up. Because when things got really hard, someone kept going. And so I need every single one of you to keep going. Don't look at what else is happening. Don't look at like, oh, can I convince Romney? Can I convince, Collins? Can I do this or that? No, you function as if you have every seat lost, and you work that way until you win. And so everyone has their homework. We're going to get out there. We're going to go. We're going to go hard for November. So we're going to have to keep at this for our lifetime.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that's my pitch too. Is like, whenever I did trials or I went into this really like intense focus mode, which is what I'm doing right now, like I'll block out, like I'll try not to go on social media as much. I'll try not to, read the news as much because I do both a lot. And, I try to eat as healthy as possible. It's like I'm training for war basically, and like try to really take care of myself so I can focus and so I can really devote my energy to what I'm trying to do. And so I think that we can continue to work and be in this fight and still be able to take care of ourselves. I think it's possible. And I think it's just a matter of, really believing that we can and that we have to continue, because like you said, this is not going to end in November. This is not going to end next year. It's a lifetime of work.
And it continues. And so just a quick reminder for folks that asked the question, yes, we also do need to pressure our California senators, so Feinstein in particular. And I think that this is where we talk about these battles that we're in. This work that we do is long lasting, because there are folks who have amassed a lot of power, and we really have to question, who is that power working for? Who is that power benefiting? Is it benefiting our communities? Because the last time I checked, like, folks have been in detention centers for a very long time. There have been inhumane conditions. Our families have been criminalized. And what I saw when I went to Karnes, Texas was egregious. It is torture that is happening with children, little children being drugged with our taxpayer dollars. And that's not okay.
And our families
so
are
this
the
is
ones
the fight.
dying right now.
Yeah. So this is
COVID.
the fight of our lives. This is the fight of our lives. We have hope. We're going to keep at it. You guys have your homework. Any final thoughts as we sign off, Aida?
Keep hope alive.
Keep hope alive. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar. Take care and keep in touch. Bye, everyone.
Bye.